was a massive meteorite.
It lit up the sky across southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales overnight on Monday. However, when the sky lit up at 7:30 p.m., astronomers and news agencies across Australia were already reporting that this was just a meteor associated with the Lyrid meteor shower that was coincidentally happening at the same time. However, it wasn't too long before a clever astronomer from the University of Southern Queensland figured out that this could not be associated with this particular meteor shower. It was scientifically impossible. It had to be something else. Granted, might still be a meteor, but if it was a strange meteor, and it was traveling extremely fast, and it managed to reach a pretty low altitude, and a sonic boom accompanied its arrival. But regardless of whether this object was a meteor or not, things have been happening in the skies of Australia, particularly over the Tasmania region and the southeast region of Australia in general, that have some people wondering whether or not a UFO outbreak might be in process. People who criticize UFO sightings like to point out the fact that virtually all of them take place in the United States, but this is simply not true. The fact of the matter is UFO sightings happen everywhere, they're just not as widely publicized. And some of the most spectacular and credible UFO sightings in history have happened in Australia, including one particular sighting that involved over 200 witnesses in 1966. Good morning, viewers, and please excuse me while I get a bit excited because we've got new merch. New merch, check it out. We have reopened the store. Look at these. Look at the quality of this stuff. Just beautiful. The Hohmann Orbital shirt. Look at that. Oh yeah, look at that. You know what? Unlike Teespring, unlike these other sorry companies, these logos don't wash out. The material is so comfortable. Look at this. If you're into asteroids, check this out, baby. In 2029, kiss your asteroids goodbye. And then this one, again, as I said, assuming the store came back, some items might get discontinued. This one's gone. So if you wanted to be on the Crew Dragon SpaceX rescue crew for the International Space Station, well, you're almost out of luck, but I'm going to show you how you can win a free shirt. One of these that have now been discontinued. I'm not even going to get one of these because the samples they got sent to me, they were all XLs. And I only have an XXL, rather. I only fit an XXL. So guess what? I'm not going to be able to keep these shirts, but you are. I'm going to be giving away 2 of these at the end of the episode. And then after that, I'm going to tell you how we're going to be giving away 2 more of these over the course of the next month and 2 more in the course of the next 1 week. So stay tuned to the end of the video. Let's get going. Good afternoon, alien enthusiasts, and welcome to another Angry Alien Bulletin. So, once again, very mysterious thing happening in Australia. For those of you who've watched this footage, I'm sure almost all of you are thinking that this is just a meteor, and maybe it is, but the problem is there is a specific meteor shower that was happening at the time, and an astronomer just happened to notice that given the time of this object's arrival, it could not possibly be part of this overall event, meaning that it had to be something other than one of these asteroids. Also, traveling very, very fast as well. This object was traveling at the top end of the typical meteoroid speed. So that very odd as well. And again, this is why Dr. Avi Loeb is investigating this matter, why he is investigating an interstellar meteoroid, something that impacted off the coast of New Guinea that was traveling too fast to be a meteor that was within the confines of our solar system, faster than solar escape velocity, that is. But in addition to that, it managed to achieve an altitude that should have been impossible for a meteor. Even the densest nickel iron meteorite should not have been able to reach the altitude that this object reached before it blew up, meaning that it had to have been made out of some kind of substance even more resilient than anything that we know meteoroids to be comprised of. So all of this a big mystery, and that's why he's been searching off the coast of New Guinea for any sort of remnants of this object to see what it might have been. And even though I'm not going to go into great detail about what he's discovered, although, spoiler alert, the residual debris that was found in the aftermath of this impact doesn't match anything that meteoroids are usually comprised out of. More matches something artificial. But all that having been said, that's why it's not a very good idea to write off these sorts of events as being meteoroids, meteorites, whatever you want to call them. By the way, meteoroid is in space. Meteor is traveling through the atmosphere. Meteorite is after it impacts. And I get those confused as often as a lot of people do. But in any event, that's the actual definition of all three of those. But the fact of the matter is we shouldn't be writing these objects off just because they look like meteors. But more importantly, other things have been happening in the skies of Australia. Things that seem to indicate that there may be a new UFO outbreak taking place. And this would be an interesting place for that to happen because Australia happens to be the location of one of the most famous mass sightings of UFOs in history. We're talking hundreds of witnesses. And to this day, this sighting remains completely unexplained. And we're just getting started. So as I mentioned before, University of Southern Queensland astronomer Professor John T. Horner said that while the fireball coincided with the Lyrid meteor shower, it was definitely not part of the annual cosmic occurrence. How could he be so sure? Simply because Australia was facing in the wrong direction to experience the Lyrid shower at that time. Quote, the dust from those two meteor showers, both Lyrid and Halley's comet associated with the Eta Aquariids, was hitting the other side of the planet and wouldn't have been able to reach us, he said. Meteor hunters shared dashcam and security camera footage to social media, appearing to show a meteor visible from as far north as Calliope, I think that's how that's pronounced, sorry, near Gladstone, and as far south as Sydney. Some deduced it would have fallen to Earth near Emmaville, south of the southern Queensland town of Stanthorpe and north of Tenterfield in New South Wales. One person posted that Emmaville was abuzz on Tuesday with people looking for fragments, but given the meteor speed, Horner said that it was unlikely that any of it had made it to the ground. Quote, my instinct is that this wasn't quite big enough to drop substantial fragments. I know some people are talking about where they'd go look for things if any debris made it to the ground, but I think it's unlikely. It doesn't take away from the fact that it was a really spectacular sight, and that was exacerbated by the fact that the time it happened is when a lot of people were out and about. Horner said that it was likely that the fireball exploded about 30 or 40 kilometers high, which meant that any loud noises that were caused by the meteor would have been heard at least 2 minutes after the flash appeared. But check this out, the footage doesn't seem to support that. That sonic boom was more or less instantaneous, meaning that whatever this thing was, it might have achieved a much lower altitude than 30 or 40 kilometers. And if that's so, this meteor might not have been a meteor after all, and I wouldn't give up on looking for debris. But all of that having been said, let's talk about some of this other footage. This UFO footage was filmed over the Tasmania region, again in southeastern Australia, and not too far away from the 1966 event that we're going to be talking about later. And although many of you probably think that this is a satellite, the trajectory, if you have a look at it, doesn't match a satellite's trajectory. This thing changes its course periodically, which satellites are simply unable to do. And you're also going to see a second object enter the frame, which also doesn't seem to be adhering to the satellite trajectory rules. But as intriguing as this footage is, nothing can compare to the so-called Westall event on April 6, 1966, that involved hundreds of witnesses from Westall High School and Westall State School in the Melbourne suburb of Clayton South in Victoria, Australia. On April 6, 1966, many students and some staff of Westall High School, now known as Westall Secondary College, in Rosebank Avenue, Clayton South, and Westall State School, which is now Westall Primary School in Fairbank Road, Clayton South, witnessed a flying saucer fly over their school and then descend into a paddock near the school. The paddock was adjacent to a grove of pine trees in an area known as the Grange, which is now a nature reserve. Soon afterwards, around 5 light aircraft appeared, giving chase to the UFO as it rapidly ascended and moved off, never to be seen again. Shortly afterwards, 1 to 3 circular patches of grass were seen by many witnesses in the paddock. Later, uniformed men thought to have been police and military personnel were seen attending the scene. After taking various measurements, some have reported that the paddock was then burnt or turned over by these uniformed men. Some witnesses reported being spoken to or later visited by these personnel. Some say that both students and staff were told not to discuss the incident, while some students reported being disciplined for speaking out. It has been estimated that about 200 people witnessed the events on that autumn day in Melbourne, and of course, skeptics say that it was a weather balloon, and local newspapers said the same thing, perhaps a balloon that had been released by the Weather Bureau at Laverton at 8:30 a.m. Although, honestly, I don't see how a weather balloon sets down in a field and then suddenly ascends in front of hundreds of witnesses and rapidly sails out of sight without somebody speculating that it might have been a balloon. And also, this photo doesn't look anything like a balloon. All that having been said, though, many of these witnesses are still alive today, and quite a number of documentaries have been made about this particular incident. So yes, this particular sighting, hundreds of witnesses, all of that, definitely a huge event in the history of ufology. However, there are other incidents that have taken place in Australia that are significantly more frightening, like this one. About 2:30 in the morning on Australia's remote Northwest Cape, Annie Farinaccio walked out of a late-night party at the United States Naval Communications Station Harold E. Holt. It was late 1991, shortly before the U.S. was due to hand over the site to Australia. The handover was happening amid mounting concern about the base's covert role as one of the cornerstones of America's submarine-launched nuclear missile defense. In the event of nuclear war, launch orders from the U.S. would be sent out by the station's powerful transmitters to submarines across the adjacent Indian Ocean. Exmouth locals had no idea their sleepy town would likely be obliterated in a nuclear exchange. They just valued what the Yanks brought to the local economy in this isolated community, and they were sad to be seeing them go. The party at the base that night was to farewell some American friends who were returning home because of the handover, but Annie had stayed too late, and now she realized there was no way of getting home. The few local taxis in this remote part of Australia had stopped for the night. So when 2 Australian Federal Protective Service police officers, who she knew as Kevin and Alan, kindly offered to give her a ride back to Exmouth, about 5 kilometers south, she gratefully accepted. But a few minutes into the journey along the Barren Cape's empty coast road, Kevin looked up and said, "It's back. Grab the camera." Then Alan began to fire off photographs through the windscreen at something overhead that Annie could not yet see. She said, quote, "Eventually Kevin pulled my head forward and said, 'Look up.' And then I saw it, a long diamond-shaped craft hovering overhead with the rear edge chopped off, rows of lights running towards the craft's tip. It was a dark gray color, but not as dark as the night sky. It was 100 feet above us at most. What the is that?" Annie asked. The policeman told her they had no idea, but that the same object had followed them the previous night. The next minute, the craft shot straight up from the right-hand side of the moving vehicle before dropping down almost instantaneously to the left-hand side of the car. Annie screamed as they hurtled along the road with the craft in apparent hot pursuit. It followed them along the road for a kilometer, and then it shot up into the sky and appeared to land in the scrub a few hundred meters off the road, a light shining from underneath. Kevin wanted to stop and take pictures of it on the ground, but Annie says, "I was crying. This is crazy. Take me home." The two police officers agreed and drove as fast as they could to the edge of Exmouth, where they dropped Annie off before rushing back to get their pictures. "I ran to my home on the other side of town, ran to the house and locked the doors. I was so freaked." 2 days later, two American military policemen walked into Annie's workplace in town and asked her to come with them. Legally, the U.S. had no jurisdiction, but she went with them anyway. Quote, "I didn't at that stage relate it to what we saw. I thought I was in trouble for being on the base drinking at night." The taciturn policeman drove Annie straight into what she knew was the top secret section of the U.S. base. "I'm mouthing off at that stage, saying I must have done something really bad," she laughs. Once inside, they led Annie into a room. Sitting in front of a group of Americans in uniform were the two police officers, Alan and Kevin. Annie knew most of the Americans on base, but here she recognized only one, the American commander. The others had clearly flown in from somewhere else. There were also 3 or 4 men in civilian suits. Quote, "I felt pissed off at this stage. One guy did the talking. He asked me, 'What did you see?' I said, 'I saw a UFO. They got me to draw it and asked me more questions about it. You do realize that what you saw was a weather balloon?' I laughed at that," Annie said. As a child, Annie had lived on a station outside Exmouth, and her father frequently launched weather balloons. "Weather balloons don't look like what I saw," she recalled telling the man. Then one of the APS policemen sitting next to me, they both had their heads down, said, "Please shut up. Shut up before you get us all killed." The interrogation went on for a few hours. It was clear the two Australian policemen had been there a lot longer. They appeared scared and dejected from the hours of questioning. Annie admits that she arced up at the Americans for trying to bully her into saying what they wanted to say. Annie is an intelligent university graduate who previously ran her own businesses. At the time of the sighting, she was working at a nearby Roebourne Regional Prison, counseling prisoners to help them find work. Fair to say, she was not easily rattled. "I said to them, 'I don't give a shit about what you say. It wasn't a weather balloon. It was a UFO. I'm not saying what you want me to say. I know I saw a UFO." The Americans clearly had no idea what to do with an uncooperative Australian local, and eventually they took her home. The first thing Annie did was ring her cousin, who had long been inquisitive about what was really going on at the base. He drove to Exmouth, and they both visited Alan at his home. Alan admitted the photographs of the craft were printed at a printing shop inside the base, and the two officers had shown them to colleagues. Next thing, they were in custody. They searched the photo machine, and they took his camera, the pics, and the negatives, Annie says. Alan told her the photographs clearly showed an intelligently guided craft, not physically landed, but hovering just above the ground. But, he said, every image he took was confiscated along with his camera. Annie knows that her story sounds implausible, but she's adamant that it's true, and she's not alone. Witnesses to strange objects in our skies have told stories like Annie's for decades, and yet they are rarely investigated or taken seriously by the press. The default position for mainstream media has long been to dismiss such accounts, even to ridicule them. After all, they sound wacky, and without official corroboration, such tales are most often spiked before the the public gets to hear about them. I know exactly how you guys feel. As I've mentioned a number of times on this channel, I get confronted over reporting on these sorts of issues on a regular basis. Many of my former viewers are just many people who are spaceflight enthusiasts, astronomy enthusiasts. They say that I'm completely destroying my reputation and destroying my legitimacy by reporting on UFOs. But let me ask you something. If a murder took place in front of hundreds of witnesses, but a body was never recovered, let's say hundreds of people saw someone shove a victim off a cliff, would there be any question that that murder took place? No, it would be an easy conviction even if they never were able to recover the body. And that goes for many, many other incidents that happen in our everyday world. If something happens in front of hundreds of witnesses, even if you don't have photographs, even if you don't have a body or any sort of physical remnants of whatever was seen, very seldom does anybody dismiss the claims of these hundreds of witnesses. And also very seldom does anybody say that journalists should not be reporting on this. And yet that's what's going on with the whole UFO stigma, prejudice, etc. And it applies to scientists as much as it applies to the media. But the fact of the matter is, there is something going on. We cannot dismiss unexplained events that happen in front of hundreds of witnesses, regardless of where the sighting may take place. And so therefore, I am never going to stop reporting on this particular topic. Before we close, let's go ahead and announce the winners of the merch contest from last month, and also going to give you some details on the new contest. The Patreon winner is Nathaniel Stapp. Repeat, Nathaniel Stapp. And the Super Chat winner is GFYS928. By interesting coincidence, an Australian supporter. GFYS928. Please reach out to me at my email address, which is located in the description. I will pay up to $15 of the shipping charge. If it ends up being significantly more than that, I may need your help on the shipping side. But otherwise, you get your choice of shirt that you'd like to have, and congratulations. And once again, these are XL shirts that I'm giving away. If this doesn't fit the winner's size, just go ahead and notify me. I have my email in the description. We'll work something out for you. We'll get you something that fits your size, regardless of whether you're an extra large man like myself, or perhaps a slender lady who doesn't want an angry astronaut sleep shirt. Also, here comes the next two contests. First of all, I'm giving away one of these shirts to a random Patreon supporter by the end of the month. So we're just talking a week away, and I will announce another winner, just a random Patreon supporter who will get one of these shirts. Your choice of the ones that I have left. And then also, between now and when the store closes on the 20th of next month, we'll be giving away two more shirts. One to a random Patreon supporter and one to a random Super Chat supporter. So keep all of that in mind. Good luck to all of you. Thanks again for your support. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, stay angry about space.